welcome back to the show. So Hamilton and Brantford in the final, fascinating matchup. Surprising to some people because they're two expansion teams, but really when you look at the way these guys played all season, they came out of the gate strong, both teams. It's really not that surprising. They had so many solid players on their teams this year. I asked Coach Ronnie Davidson after the big win against Toronto, Croatia, what he thought would be Hamilton's keys to victory against Brantford in the final. Take a listen.
We played them down here at Brian Timmins with 2-2. It was a great game. They've changed their roster, so it's got a difficult question to answer actually, and I think it will be clearly they're poking up front, and the midfield will be a tough battle. Brantford brought in a lot of imported players, so those players are going to be big game players. So we're going to, I think it'll be a patient game by both teams. I'm expecting a tough game.
And I like Ronnie's honesty there about it's a very difficult question because the fact that Brantford's roster has changed throughout the year.
Yeah.
They've lost some of those key players. Let's start with Brantford then and go about that because, you look at like Drazen Vukovic, who they lost to, was their top scorer, was their MVP early in the season. They lose him to a knee injury. He goes back home to Croatia. And they could have folded up their 10 at that point, but they have so many good players on this team, so much depth on this team. And it's not surprising they've done as well as they had, and they're going to throw a lot at Hamilton in the final.
Oh, you got that right, Alex. A couple keys to Brantford's Galaxy's success so far this season has been their goaltending. Ante Damjanovic has come up big game after game after game. But let's not talk about the scoring machine and Ranko Golin. This guy here scored a couple fantastic goals. He scored 3 against Portugal FC, but 2 of them were just fantastic goals. This guy here knows what it takes to win. He's in his early 30s and he's still out there running like a young man. Also, let's talk about Bukala. This guy's come to play in the last 3 or 4 games, and Kyle Grotenboer. This guy brings a lot to the table, and I think Brantford seems to me, Alex, clicking on all the right cylinders right now.
What do you say about your big game players? Though they come through in the big game situations, and Golinin certainly did that. He's been their leader all season long. The respect this guy gets. When I did the team profile for Brantford and I was going around interviewing the different players and the coaches, the tremendous respect this guy gets. That's why he's their team leader. 3 goals. Another guy I want to mention who's just an absolutely phenomenal defender, Patrick Gerhardt.
Yes.
The young Swiss player who
Yes.
really, I'm knocking myself in the head because we haven't talked about this guy enough throughout the season. This guy is absolutely unreal on the back end for Brantford, so solid, and I'll tell you what, when he wants to go with the ball, there's nothing stopping this guy.
No,
he
he's
just
got
goes right
blazing
through.
speed.
Absolutely.
Blazing speed.
Yeah.
And this is a young guy. I'm glad you mentioned him because we haven't really talked about him very much. Very solid, very composed, a lot of speed. And this is what I've noticed about the Brantford Galaxy. You can't really rattle them in the back there. If one goes in, that's fine. They regroup quickly and they're ready to come at you. I mean, Portugal FC collapsed, Alex. When they came back and tied that game 2-2, bang, Brantford Galaxy scored a 1 within a couple minutes after that, and lights out for Portugal FC after that.
Peaking at the right time, and that is the key, as we've mentioned all season long with this. Hamilton, what can you say? A great coach in Ronnie Davidson. A club that's been around for over 50 years, and again, they're not an expansion team. They did exist, of course, in the OSL last year. Very, very strong program for years. They brought in some key additions this year, such as a Preston Corporal, who just absolutely shone for them. And it's great to see them in the final, and they're such a strong team.
Yeah, they're going to have to contain Preston Corporal, Aidan O'Keefe. We've got the veteran in Jamie Dodds. Again, I said to you, this guy will go through a brick wall for his team and his teammates to win. The smarts of Ronnie Davidson. But again, the key again comes down to meet the goaltending. Melford James against Ante Damjanovic. This is going to be a display of goaltending that we've never seen before.
Yeah, speaking as a former goalie myself, not at the high level these guys are, but my father played professionally and stuff, and I just have such an admiration when I see fantastic goaltending, and that's what I saw in the game against Toronto, Croatia. The saves that James Melford was making absolutely had me shaking my head, the supporters shaking their head, and Hamilton fans feeling pretty proud because this guy has made all the difference on that team. And as I said last year, I predicted before the semi, I said this guy could be Hamilton's game breaker because he's been that strong. He has so far. So looking at this matchup now, your keys to victory for this game, what is it going to be for both teams? What do you think?
Hamilton is going to have to contain Golin. They're going to have to contain him, and they're going to have to capitalize on their chances that they get against Ante Damjanovic. They have to put away their chances. If it's 1 or 2 chances early on, they have to bury their chances. As for Brantford Galaxy, you know, this is a team that's hard to figure out, Alex. They'll go up 2-0 as they did against Portugal FC. They collapse 2-2, but then they pick it up right again with Ranko and Bakula and the veterans they have there, and they bring it up another notch, and they just give it back. And they score and they score and they score in waves. So it could come down to some of the younger, fresher legs in Hamilton, Croatia, against the veteran guys in Brantford Galaxy. This is going to be a very hard one to pick.
Jason Leggett, Ian Leggett, Jason Shannon for Hamilton. Two guys also we haven't mentioned enough that have been so impressive this year as we wind it down here. What I'm really looking forward to is, I mean, you really couldn't have asked for two better teams in terms of crowd support. These are probably the two best attended teams in the CSL this year. And it's going to be just a great atmosphere. Next week, we're going to have a finals recap. We're both obviously going to be at the game doing interviews. We're going to have a finals recap. But this is one of the most highly anticipated finals we've had in the CSL for a long time. Thanks for being here, buddy.
What's your pick quickly,
Alex? Quickly, I'm going to have to take Hamilton.
So my Hamilton and Ronnie Davidson. Good luck to both teams.
We'll be back in just a moment. So it's Hamilton and Brantford for all the marbles, two first-year squads that looked the veteran CSL clubs right in the eyes and refused to blink all season. It's going to be a fascinating matchup, and here's a look now at what fans can expect from the big game.
In a year that saw 3 expansion teams hit the field for the first time, 2 of those squads remain standing to face off for the CSL Championship title on October 31st. It's a scenario that was almost unthinkable to the average fan back on May 8th, when the season kicked off. However, when you look deeper into the makeup of the rosters of both Brantford and Hamilton, a clearer picture emerges as to why these squads were so competitive right away. First, a look at Hamilton, Croatia. As we've mentioned before, while this is their first year in the Canadian Soccer League, they are by no means a brand new team. The Croats previously played in the OSL and brought the bulk of their established team to the league this year. Hamilton, Croatia have a proud tradition that goes back over 50 years, and led by 2009 OSL Coach of the Year Ronnie Davidson, they had a strong foundation in place to compete immediately with the traditional powers of the CSL. And compete they did. Hamilton came flying out of the gate this year, going undefeated in their first 6 games. The loudest wake-up call they delivered to the CSL establishment occurred back on July 9th, when the Croats took on a veteran Portugal FC squad and blanked them 5-0 at Lamport Stadium in one of the most dominant performances of any team this year. Some key players for Hamilton: Liberian international Preston Corporal, a first-year player who was one of the CSL's leading scorers and one of its most dynamic young players. Aidan O'Keefe, an Irish import who finished 3rd overall in goals with 12. Ivan Razumovic, a Croatian who has added a solid presence to the Hamilton back end. Jason Shannon adds more punch up front, and Adam Leggett is a creative midfielder with a scorer's touch. By far the biggest addition, though, down the stretch made by Ronnie Davidson was the addition of James Melford Jr., a Brampton native who previously played with the Chicago Fire of MLS, and in the 10 games he started since joining the team, he's been the league's top goalkeeper over that time. In contrast to Hamilton, the Brantford Galaxy were a team that truly started from scratch in 2010. They brought in talented imports from Europe and mixed them with up-and-coming players from Brantford's youth soccer system to create a winning combination. Brantford also shot out of the gate this year, going unbeaten in their first 5 games and capturing the imagination of a city that was starving for professional soccer. One player that captivated fans immediately was Croatian import Dražen Vukovic, who scored highlight reel goals and was one of the league leaders by mid-season. However, an unfortunate knee injury knocked Vukovic out for the rest of the year in July. That's when Brantford needed to regroup. After a slide that put a playoff berth in question, veterans stepped up and carried this squad to the promised land. You can't say enough about striker Ranko Goljanin, their offensive weapon who led the team with 11 goals in the regular season and a massive hat-trick in the semi-final last weekend. Miodrag Anđelković is a Serbian import that added 10 goals, and keeper Ante Damjanovic has been a standout in goal for the Galaxy all season and will need to be at the top of his game to hold off a powerful Hamilton offense. There's not much separating these teams. In 2 head-to-head matchups this year, they tied both games. The first was a 2-2 draw on June 11th, and then again on July 18th, they tied 3-3. The Brantford Galaxy and Hamilton, Croatia. 2 first-year CSL teams competing for its biggest prize this Sunday. These teams had the best fan support of any clubs this year, and the atmosphere at Centennial Stadium promises to be electric. So there it is. The final goes Sunday, October 31st at Centennial Stadium. Brantford and Hamilton